Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good. Welcome to our Hot Glass Show. This is our amphitheater hot shop, and we have a really special morning. This is part of our You Design It, We Make It program. I'm going to talk all about that, but I want to introduce the team right off the bat. Our featured gaffer is going to be Catherine Ayers. She's right here. Let's give Catherine a nice round of applause. Keep it going for Helen Tegler. She's going to be giving Catherine a hand. My name is Chris Rochelle. I'll also jump in and give them some assistance during this demo, but I'll be narrating the process. And welcome to anybody that's joining us online. So Julia designed this camel, and this is her description. She says, "My fairy tale is about a poor girl named Melissa and her magic camel, Peanut. He can make anything out of sand. The little dots on him are glitter, and the pink on his back is his saddle for Melissa to ride on him. Together, the two help people who need things by making them out of sand. They are a very good team. P.S. Melissa has tan skin, but I did not have that color. I really hope you picked my picture. Also, I loved watching you make the donut monster." So we have a lot of You Design It's that we have done in the past, and the last one, 2 weeks ago, Helen Tegler created the donut monster. It was a donut truck with a donut monster that had 4 arms and donuts in his hands, and that one was a lot of fun. Now, if you're curious about that, and any of you here want to see that donut monster, one thing that's really cool about this program is that these live streams are also uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch that live action on Wednesday mornings or go back and watch those videos after the fact, if you go to YouTube and check out the Corning Museum of Glass channel on there, you can see those catalog videos. But during these live streams from 10 till noon, we're actually broadcasting that online. So it's a really fun way to tune in and check it out. Every other Wednesday right now until the summertime, we also have a series called Bring the Heat. And I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through here. But if you're not familiar with the Glass Studio, we have a melting furnace where we really begin the process. In that furnace, we have clear glass held at 2,100 Fahrenheit. So we will be working out of that, as well as some reheating furnaces that you're going to see them use. But 2,000 degrees, 2,100 Fahrenheit, that's really our standard temperature range. And there's a lot of ways to add color. So Catherine has done some prep work this morning. She actually made one part of the camel already. The head of the camel is sitting inside of an oven that's sort of babysitting it right now. But this is one way to apply color, because of the glass that we melt is clear, it's colorless. What this stuff is, it's called frit, F-R-I-T, and we also have some glass powders that we're using. The frit has the consistency of granulated sugar. So when you take molten clear glass at 2,100 Fahrenheit, you roll through, the frit heats up instantly, and hot glass sticks to itself. So it's a pretty fast application. And she's got an opaque yellow, she has a transparent gold, we have an ochre yellow, there's a raspberry, there's a fuchsia transparent pink out here, so lots of different colors. But I think Catherine's beginning by creating the body of the girl here that will be on the camel. So in the drawing, the girl isn't actually on the camel, but to make this one cohesive piece, Catherine's sort of taking a little artistic freedom here, and she'll put the girl on the saddle of the camel. But there's a lot of ways to approach building something like this when we sculpt glass. And we're going to really utilize one of my favorite ovens that we have up here. This is such a wonderful addition to a glass studio, this garage. So for all of you in the amphitheater far right, this garage has 2 different heat zones. There's a burner firing natural gas into the left side, which heats that up. That's probably about 1,500 Fahrenheit or so in there. But the majority of the right side of this is around 1,000 degrees. Now we have a thermostat and a controller on there so we can tell what temperature we want. But at 1,000 degrees, the glass that we work is rigid. It's rock solid. So we can sculpt components when they're very hot and soft, put them together. Once we're done sculpting those parts, we can let them turn rigid and put them into the, let's say, the cooler side of the garage. And that'll keep them right where we need them until we're ready to pull them out and start joining them to the body of the piece. But the reheating ovens, and this is a really neat view that you're getting right now, these are running, right now that's at 2,000 degrees, so that's designed to soften the glass that we have. And the heat is really, that's the key. So to shape glass, it's got to be very hot, very soft. I'll point out too that Catherine has been blowing glass for a little more than 20 years, so she's really skilled. Helen's been at it for about 25 years, so between the two of them, we've seen a lot of skill. So I don't know if she'll actually be doing any glass blowing for this. Are you gonna, no, it's gonna all be solid? Okay, so all be solid sculpted work. you're going to see Catherine use this torch quite a bit. When we do any sculpture, we call this the hot torch, and I know that all torches are hot, but that torch uses oxygen with natural gas, and that kicks the flame temperature up a lot. So using that torch, we can really spot heat certain areas of whatever we're working, and now she's doing a little flame working. So detailing with, that's a little rod of glass color. So we have over 200 color choices nowadays. The colors are formed by melting in different metal oxides or metallic chlorides with the raw ingredients to make glass. But she has pulled some of these stringers or little rods of glass concentrated color for use for these types of details that she's doing. Can anybody here tell me the main ingredient to glass? Does anybody know it? What glass is made of? What is it? Sand, very good, thank you very much. Silica sand is the special type of sand that's used. You could take beach sand and you could melt it in a furnace and it would melt into a glass. But beach sand has a lot of other impurities in there. Chunks of rock, shell, other debris. Doesn't melt down so clean. And the type of glass that we're working with does come from silica sand. It's called soda lime. But silica sand is a really refined, a very fine particulate as well. Soda ash and limestone are the other two main parts. And soda lime glass is the most common type in the world. So she's got the head of the girl, and again, Brad's up there. We have cameras mounted all around us, so he uses those cameras and gets some good close-up shots.
Keep it on the pole or put it on a paddle?
So this view that you're getting right now, that reheating oven, again, it's 2,000 degrees. There's no camera that I know of that would survive the inside of that oven, but there's a camera mounted right behind it, and there's a little window of fused silica. You folks are probably in the right spot to see it. If you look straight through, there's a little port in the back of that oven. That fused silica window has a really, really high melting temperature. So that's a specialty type of glass that allows us to see into the furnace. But we've got the head of the little girl. Catherine's handed it off to Helen, and Helen is now placing that into the garage. She's gonna bonk it off onto a little shovel. So there's a lot of different ways we could kind of move things around in that garage. But ultimately, that is just a babysitter. So one thing that's very important with glass, you can't let it cool too quickly once it turns rigid. So our glass becomes rock solid once it drops to 1,000 degrees. If you hear me say we're cooling the glass or it's starting to cool or get cold, that's what we mean, is rigid. Cold means rigid. 1,000 degrees is cold. So we can put cold pieces into that oven, keep them in their rigid state, and then when we're ready, we'll pull them out and reheat them. But ultimately, when you're done making anything, you have to slowly cool it. That's a process called annealing. The piece that she's making right now, I don't think this is going to be very, very thick, but it'll probably take 12 hours to properly anneal. So if you stick around for the whole thing, when we're done with this, we're going to place it into an oven that brings it from 900 safely and slowly to room temperature. Very important part of the process. Is there a question online? Julia's watching. Welcome, Julia. Excellent drawing. Thanks for joining us. This is... No, go ahead. The origin behind the word frit, I do not know. That's a good question, though. I've never been... I don't know. Well, I will talk a little bit more about the frit, though. So the frit comes from a color company. We buy from a company over in Germany called the Reichenbach Company. So they have a big factory, and in that factory, they have lots of different melting furnaces. So in each furnace, they'll melt separate colors, and they'll extract it from that furnace in a variety of ways. It's pretty standard for a glass studio to melt colorless glass because you have to keep that melting furnace running 24/7. There's a lot of glass inside of that. You've got to keep it hot to work out of it daily. So you could have multiple furnaces, and in each furnace you could melt a different color, but that kicks your overhead cost up a lot. So most businesses will have one main furnace of clear glass. Then you can select the frit, you can select the powders, and even color rod too. So I'll show you another way that you can work with color. This is a good example right here. So this is color bar. When you melt the frit into something, you get kind of these little speckles of color that blend in. And so the whole piece can look like it's colored, but you ultimately end up with kind of like little dots of color. It might be hard to tell. We have so many pieces down here. But if you look at that amber closely, you can actually see it almost looks like mottled because of all the frit melted together. If you don't want that effect and you want a solid veil of color, you have to use one large piece, and that comes from Color Bar. So this is actually a concentrated purple. It looks black, doesn't it? This is so dense. You can break an inch of this off and you can make a bubble about this big, and then you'll see that beautiful transparent purple. If you use too much and you don't stretch it far enough, then it looks really dense. If you use too little and stretch it too far, it'll actually wash out and fade away. But so you learn the colors just by application, just by using them and seeing how much you need to use. But there's a lot of planning that goes into that too. So before you prep that color and break off whatever piece you need, you have to say, how big do I want that bubble to be? How much color am I going to need to prep beforehand? Catherine's using some tweezers here. We have tweezers, we have shears, we have some crimps, we have stamps that we can use to texture the glass. And I think she's continuing to work the body of the girl. There's two ways that we can heat the glass. We have the reheating furnace, which we've talked about, that 2,000 degree oven, and we have that torch. And the dials on that torch can be adjusted, so we can increase the pressure of the oxygen and gas or decrease it. And if you turn it all the way up, I think that torch will reach almost 4,000 degrees, which is a lot of heat. That's something that's been adapted from what flame workers use. So if you have time today, for you folks that are in-house, we have a flame working demonstration that goes throughout the day. They work with a different type of glass called borosilicate. Anybody heard of this? Boro? Anybody heard of Pyrex? Usually a lot of people say yes. Pyrex is a type of borosilicate. It's a brand name that Corning created years ago. But borosilicate has a much higher melting temperature, and it's a different type of glass in the sense that you can hold on to rods and tubing of boro in your hands, and you can heat them right in a flame and actually sculpt them very closely. That type of glass has a lower thermal expansion, which basically just means that it's not as prone to cracking or breaking from those rapid temperature changes. So they can work on it right with their bare hands, and it's fine. But they need an oxygen gas torch to reach those higher temperatures because borosilicate has a much higher melting point than soda lime. But for us here in the hot shop, it's a great addition, especially for sculpting glass, for all those little fine details that we want to get. When she goes over to this reheating oven, you can stay in that oven longer and longer, and you can really soften the glass. But once you start to sculpt details on a form, if you heat too long in that oven, you'll lose the details. You'll melt them away. So we can really employ that hot torch to help us out. The other torch that's sort of candling right now, that's just a propane torch, and we call that one the fluffy torch or the weed burner. And that has more of it's a lower temperature. I'm not exactly sure how hot, but around 1,500 Fahrenheit, give or take. And that's just used to kind of keep certain areas warm at times, or maybe do a little bit of preheating. So we'll talk more about that one. But you saw them transfer I think this is the torso of the girl. You saw them transfer it over to a handle that Helen brought. We call that handle a punty. And we're going to see a lot of punties for this piece. When we go to transfer something or move it from one rod to another, you have to break the glass free or cut it free. And these punties are just a little bit of glass that sticks to whatever form you have. And those punties are designed to come free eventually. So there's not a lot of time to manipulate this material, especially when you have smaller bits like this. There's less thermal mass than a large amount of glass, so it really does stiffen up pretty quickly. Some people are curious. I didn't talk about the material that we're working with in terms of the rods and the blowpipes, but these are stainless steel. So can everybody here see where it's really shiny and then it starts to darken and tarnish? That's the end that you gather the glass on. Stainless is not a good conductor of heat. It is a conductor because it's a metal, but that heat doesn't transfer all the way up. So as we're working with these rods or the blowpipes, we can usually comfortably hold on to 2/3 of it, at least half of it. Now there is, as I move my hand up, I can feel it getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and you'd never want to touch there. You learn that very quickly. Stainless steel. You might hear them say, Irons, we tend to say, do you want a 3/4 iron? Do you want a 1/2-inch iron and whatnot? And that's just the size, the diameter. Iron is just shop talk for us, but they are all stainless steel. Does anybody here have any questions so far? You have a question? What is it? Why did she cut off the extra part? So the amount of glass that she gathered and she rolled through some color, she's kind of portioning things off. So she wants to make sure that, I believe this is the torso, the shirt. She wants to make sure that everything looks proportionate to what she's doing. So we can heat it, we can cut it, you can kind of pinch it, pull it around, do what you need. Do you have a question up there? That's a great question. So this particular program, this You Design It, We Make It, the designer of this object is going to end up taking this piece home, or we'll ship it out to them for a cost. But yeah, this is a really neat program. This is something that we have been doing here at the museum for many, many years. This program's evolved quite a bit, but right now during the end of, hopefully the end of winter and spring season into summer, every other Wednesday, we're going to be doing a You Design It, We Make It program. So anybody here, anybody in the world can submit a design. The way that we're doing that currently is to have you go onto our website, so cmog.org, and submit your drawing or submit your design, whatever that is. You can write your description, and every week, or every other week rather, our team is going to select from that pool of drawings for that specific week, and we'll create that, and then that person gets to take that piece home or have it shipped to them. So it's a really fun program. There's been so many pieces that have been made. At one point, we were doing 2 You Design It's a day during our summer programming. We didn't have as much time as we have right now. We had about 30 to 40 minutes to do it, but a really great benefit the way we're doing it now is that we can select the drawing days in advance, give our team some time to think about it, to formulate a plan, to prep some work, get things ready for it, and then have a 2-hour session to make it with a team down here. So it's a lot of fun. And they are themed. So this was Once Upon a Time. This one was the theme Once Upon a Time. Next one, so 2 weeks from today, is Take a Walk on the Wild Side. Is that the one? Something on the wild side. I just looked at it. There was 1 submission so far for it. But yeah, definitely check that out if you're interested, if you want to see your design come to fruition. We can't promise you that we'll select it, but if it gets in the pool of those designs, we will certainly take a really good look at it and read your description and give it a shot. You have another question? When we make the glass, hopefully it won't break. No. If it ever gets too cold, and remember that's a relative term, if it ever gets too cold, it can break very, very easily. Do you need something, Catherine? Crossing your fingers. Yep, we don't want to think about that. I'm sure this will go just fine. But yeah, that's why we slowly cool glass. That process is called annealing. If you make anything, if you make this bowl down here, that pitcher, anything, if you make it and you set it out at room temperature, when you're done with it, it cools rapidly, it cracks, it falls right apart. So we have to put it into a special oven to bring it safely down to room temperature. We learn the rhythm of how to keep things the right heat with experience. So again, 20 years of experience that Catherine has. She knows when to get up and take a reheat. She knows how long she can stay away from the ovens to make sure nothing breaks. Oh, so we're putting the head on. Okay, I see. Need a door? So Catherine has the torso pretty much done where she wants it, and time to put the head on. Helen has pulled the head out of the garage.
Face down, I don't want to get her too hot.
This is a one-shot deal. As soon as she attaches it, it sticks. Nice job. So a little bit more about how we operate with the garage. When we pull something out of that oven at 1,000 degrees, it's really important that you go right into one of those reheating furnaces. because if you just pull it out at 1,000 degrees and you're at room temperature, it's kind of chilly in here this morning, 60 degrees, it can crack that very, very quickly. So when you watch us do that, and Helen did, she takes it out on that shovel and she went right into this other reheating oven, just for a little bit of time. You don't want to overheat it while it's on the shovel because it can start to melt and distort. But you need to give it a little blast of heat or life to make sure it doesn't crack or break. On that shovel, we put a little bit of kiln wash on here. I'll show you a different one. We have a bunch of these. The metal will stick to hot glass. Hot glass and hot metal will stick to each other unless you put a kiln wash on there. So it's basically like mud. But it's designed to stop the glass from sticking to the hot metal. So sometimes that kiln wash will remain on the glass object to get a little bit that's on there, and she has a whisk broom just to brush it off. If you overheat the glass with a kiln wash on it, then you can't brush it off. But you'll generally see us do that very quickly for that move. So I heard Catherine talking a bit about her approach right before we started up down here. And she said she's going to make the body of the girl and put it in the garage. Then she's going to make the camel, and I think she's going to put the legs on the camel first and then put the body onto the legs. Again, there's so many different ways to do this, but it is very important that you plan it out. You want to have everything, mentally prepped before you do it to make sure everything's in order. So Julia online wanted to know why Catherine was using a broom on the figure's face. Again, so that paddle that we just brought the face out on had a little bit of dust on it, essentially. So she's just brushing the dust off there so nothing sticks to it. It does seem kind of silly, though, to just be brushing some hot glass, just removing any residue. What do you need, Catherine? Flash it? Sure. There's a Dremel over here. When we take something for a very brief reheat to avoid it cracking or breaking, we call that a flash heat. So when we say, take this for a flash, please, that's all we need. So it looks like there might be a little bit of dust that stuck to the smile. The smile is made of black glass, as are those eyes. And talking about colors, some of the colors are very soft, which means they pick up heat and texture very quickly. They can grab that dust very quickly. Those soft colors are prone to that. So even though that was just a really brief reheat that Helen took with the head on the shovel, it looks like the black kind of picked up some of that kiln wash. So that Dremel that she's using just kind of grinds that dust off of there. All right. So Catherine's now going to work on the head of the camel. And she made one of these earlier, so she's going to make another one right now. That'll give her the option of which one to choose. Have you ever made a camel before, Catherine? No? Okay. So it's nice to also have a little bit of practice time just to kind of go through the steps of making something that you've never made before. And, usually with everything else, the more you make it, the better you get at it. So she made one camel head this morning. She's going to make another one right now. And chances are, oh, you made a few yesterday too? Okay. So she'll make another one right now. It's hard to sculpt glass and give it the details that make it look like the animal that you're trying to make it look like, but through refinement, practice, and figuring out the steps. But now she's rolling through that, is this iris opal yellow? Yeah. Another question? So another question, a very, very common question that we just got online. Why aren't we wearing heat-proof gloves? Now, when we're working, especially smaller scale like this, we need the dexterity in our fingers and our hands. So we talked about the stainless steel rods. They allow us to hold on to them as we're working safely. But when we're using shears and we're using tweezers and all these things, if we had gloves on, it's really hard to get your hands in there. It's really hard to feel the dexterity that you need. It's almost like putting gloves on and trying to type an email, right? It'd be really hard to do so. You do see Helen sporting a leather glove, so I like to do this as well. When we're doing any garage work, right now we have the paddle in the garage, so it's heating this end up. And these are stainless as well, so you can kind of grab back here, but when you have an important piece of glass on that paddle, it's really nice to have a little bit more comfort and ultimately more control, so you can put a left-handed leather glove on and you can hold up a little bit higher on that paddle and not worry about it tilting and losing whatever is on the paddle. So for those types of moves, we will put a glove on sometimes. You'll see us use, if you stick around to the end of this, you'll see us use Kevlar gloves to grab the piece of glass. Kevlar is a really good insulated material. You can hold on to a 1,000-degree piece of glass with Kevlar mittens long enough to get it into the oven where it slowly cools. But generally for something like this, we simply don't need to wear gloves while we're working. It's a pretty small scale. If we work really big pieces of glass, we might put a glove on, but that's when you see the team kind of jumping in and turning the pipe for you. Sometimes we'll put an arm sleeve on. It's made from Kevlar, Nomax, and shield our arms. But this scale is pretty small, and for somebody of Catherine's skill, no need for it. But good question. We also have compressed air, that sort of hissing noise that you just heard. We have an air gun. We can spray the glass with compressed air. This isn't heated or cooled, it cools the glass quickly. So if you have a hot bowl of soup and you want to cool it down a little bit faster, you might blow on it. We can do the same thing with the glass. So it just stiffens certain areas up. And she said she's not going to be doing any glass blowing for this. This will all be solid. But the way that we're blowing glass right now, while we're wearing masks, is using compressed air. So we have another bench, just the same setup as what she's working at. We have a line of compressed air that fits to this cap. The cap goes on the back of a blowpipe, that stainless steel tube. And then we activate this system with a foot pedal, and that releases air pressure through it. So if you watch a blown demonstration with us today, you're going to see us using that system, which is a very different way of working. But for the time being, while we're wearing masks, that's what we do. Again, this will be going until noon, give or take. There's no specific time frame on how long it will take to make this, but we have until noon for our event to do it. And after that, starting at 12:30 down here, we have our standard glass blowing shows. They're about 15 minutes a piece, and you'll see that compressed air system being used. None of the colors really look accurate either right now. So the base yellow that she has is this opal yellow. But everything when it's really hot looks orange from the light that the glass emits. But even some of these opal yellows, the opal oranges and reds, they always look a little bit more muddy, kind of darker tone than they truly are. But once this piece is cooled to room temperature, we'll see that true color. Did you have another question? What is it? Can we what? You do have to be careful when you're sculpting glass. You can see Catherine using those tweezers quite a bit, and she's grabbing pretty high up on them, but she knows not to grab the tips of those tweezers after using them. So that's a more common way to get burned, is by using a hot tool and grabbing it at the wrong moment or just being a little careless with it. But it's really never the glass that we get burned by, because we know the glass is hot. We're always aware of it. We're looking at it. And really, currently, the most common burn that I personally get is when we use this tool, which is folded up newspaper. Now this one's totally dry. You wouldn't want to shape glass with this until you get it wet. But you use the newspaper pad wet. She has one over there on the bench. And when you're shaping with it, ash does kind of burn off from it, and it likes to float around and kind of land right here on your forearm. Now normally if that happens, blow it off. But when you're wearing a mask, you can't blow it off. It just kind of sits there and smolders away until it goes out. So those are just little nuisance burns, nothing that stops you from working. That's a very common tool right there that she has, that butter knife. For sculpting glass, that is really versatile. Just a lot of ways to use it. You can kind of carve into the glass with it. You can use the flat side to sort of push things around.
All right, when you come back, we'll do the eyelids.
If you're sculpting larger amounts of glass, you have something that's just like the butter knife, but a little bit more substantial, called a tag or a taglia. So really the same kind of thing, the flat edge or the thin edge for carving in the glass, and then the flat side for broader strokes. We see Helen dipping into this furnace quite a bit and taking gathers of glass. So let's talk a little bit more about that oven. And Brad, can you roll that gathering animation if we have that cued? In that furnace, we have a big ceramic crucible. This one can hold 1,000 pounds of glass. Thanks, Brad. So if you look at the screens, this is an animation that shows the gathering process. That ceramic crucible can hold 1,000 pounds if we fill it. And they come in a variety of sizes. That's a pretty big one. It's not full right now, but there's probably 700 pounds, give or take, in there. And it's a lot like table honey in consistency, the glass, that is, at that temperature range. So when you take a rod or a blowpipe and you dip in, you have to turn very smoothly and consistently in one direction. And then you go level with that rod to kind of catch the gather. And it's really difficult to do that properly. After doing it thousands and thousands of times, it's just pure muscle memory. But in the beginning, when you first try to gather glass, it's pretty messy. It's not an easy thing to do. That's a little brass rod that she has with a wooden handle.
I love that little brass rod.
There's so many different little hand tools that we can use. The building that we're in right now, we call this our amphitheater hot shop. And we opened this in 2015. In fact, our melting furnace has been going nonstop ever since. We turned it on in January of 2015. And it will need to be replaced. The crucible inside will need to be replaced eventually. Hopefully get a couple more years of use out of it before that happens. But this amphitheater, the footprint of the amphitheater, it used to be the Steuben glass factory. The framework that you can see in here, the sort of the iron beams that you see, this is the original framework to what was the Steuben factory. It shut down years ago, and our museum expanded into this. So the Contemporary Art and Design Gallery that you walked through to come in here, that was constructed at the same time as our amphitheater. So it took about 3.5 years from the day they broke ground on it to complete it and open it up to the public. But when the Steuben factory shut down, many of the hand tools that were used there for specialty jobs at Steuben Glass, we acquired some of them. And that little brass rod that she was just using is one of them. Doing a little more bit work. You can see her using some diamond shears. So there's basically two types of shears in a glass studio, two standard profiles anyway. Straight shears, you can see everybody probably has something like this at home. You can cut cardboard and paper, plastic, and then diamond shears. So that refers to the blades when they squeeze together and it creates that diamond-shaped aperture. If you cut glass with the straight shears, you inevitably end up with a long tapered cut. So you're shaping the glass by doing that. If you don't want that long tapered shape, you can use the diamond shears, and they terminate the glass to more of a, I don't want to say a blunt edge because they are sharp, but you terminate to a smaller point. Diamond shears are also good for grabbing the glass, so you can kind of grab it and stretch it if you want to, or grab it and twist it. You'll see her use both of them. But yeah, even that move right there, using the straight shears, she cut that bit to a taper intentionally, and that looks like it's for one of the ears. It's so cool to watch a sculpture come together. Starts off as a little blob, something unidentifiable, but then after you start adding all these bits, you really see the life kind of coming to it. So aside from practicing the steps and making the actual heads out of glass, Catherine also has a little sketchbook that's next to the bench. And you can see the neck of the camel. So she's thought about all these moves that are, coming up here. But I'm going to bet this camel head will go into the garage as well and will be saved until the end of the process when we have the body of the camel Get the neck on there, shaped up, and then put the head on. And there's our drawing again. So I mentioned earlier that Catherine's going to take a little bit of design freedom here, and she's going to place the girl onto the camel. So she could make this two separate pieces, but to make it one complete object, we will adhere the girl's body to the camel, so she'll be sitting on the pink saddle. And that's that little black stringer that she has for the eyeballs. You can see how quickly that torch just liquefies that little rod of black. Which makes it such a valuable addition for sculpting. There's not actually a true black colored glass. If you stretch any black glass thin enough, you're going to start to see a purple hue. But when it's dense enough, it appears black. We talked about the You Design It program, how it will be every other Wednesday. The other Wednesdays, and so a week from today, we'll be doing a Bring the Heat series. So this is something new that we've begun. And this one coming up, in a week from today, Helen Tegler, who's helping Catherine right now, will be collaborating with one of our flame workers, Caitlin Hyde, to create, I think, a couple different bottles. And Caitlin's a really, really creative, excellent flame worker who will be making stoppers, and the stoppers will have these little figurines on top of them. And I've seen a variety of them that they have been working on over the past couple months, and they are absolutely amazing. They are so cool. So that'll be a fun one to tune into. Again, that's next Wednesday from 10 till noon. Caitlin will be out here with her torch doing the work while Helen is making the bottles. Another question? So there's a question about how do you choose between using the butter knife and the tag. So I showed the difference in scale between these. So this is the tag that we're referring to. It's really kind of the same thing as the butter knife, but the butter knife is very, very small. So if you're working some small scale like this, you can imagine if you brought the tag up to it and you wanted to, put little divots into it, this is just kind of cumbersome. This is a little bit too big. Also, this is a good segue to talk about the tools and how they draw temperature away from the glass. So as you're touching the glass or cutting it or pinching or pulling it with the metal tools, the metal stiffens the glass. And the larger the tool or the more metal you have, the quicker it's going to stiffen that material. So in this case, with a really small detail, you wouldn't want to use a really big metal tool on it. So the butter knife is a better approach. Yeah, any tool inevitably touches or inevitably draws the heat from the glass and chills it. So you really learn that. We have graphite tools, we have wooden tools, that newspaper, metal, and they all pull temperature away at different rates. I think she's done with the head, but you see her crimping the back of that head down with the shears. She sort of softened it with a torch, and she's crimping it down. That gives us a break-off line. So those constrictions are something that we employ on everything we make. To get pieces free from the pipes or these rods, you have to break those items free. And we want a clean constriction so they'll snap free with no trouble. Helen's reinforcing that constriction right now. So we've got the torso and the head of the girl done, put away in the garage. We have two heads that we can use for the camel. That one looked really good, so I'm willing to bet she'll use that one. And Catherine actually is going to do a little bit of glass blowing for the body of the camel. I bet she'll leave it pretty thick, but we will see a little bit of glass blowing, so she now has that stainless steel tube called the blowpipe. So you'll get to see this compressed air system in action. She'll shape and center everything on the blowpipe. The tool she has here is called a block. This is a fruit wood scoop. the buckets behind her that those blocks are in are just full of tap water. So she latches the cap onto the back of the pipe and she'll tap that foot pedal in front of her. And if you watch the glass very closely, you can see a bubble form. It doesn't take much. The system that we're using has a regulator on there so we can dial the pressure up or down. And right now it's at about 2 psi or less. That's like a whisper. It doesn't take much. Glass is this hot, it's extremely easy to inflate. In fact, we're really careful not to blow too hard. A lot of people ask us what happens if you do blow hard or if you keep blowing. You can blow a bubble extremely thin when it's that hot, but it can lose the support where it can actually just collapse in on you. But we have to build something in multiple layers. Those are called gathers. So we saw that gathering animation earlier of how we collect glass. She's made a core bubble, a starter bubble, a foundation to build on. She wants more material to make the body of the camel, so she's letting that bubble drop in temperature and turn rigid. And once it's stable enough, she'll plunge it back in the furnace, and then she can gather about 3 times as much glass. If you dip into that furnace with a bubble that's still too hot or too soft, you don't have the stability anymore, and it's really hard to maintain control of the gather. So timing and temperature, very, very important. But it looks like that's all the glass she needs because she's now applying that color, that opal yellow frit. Usually when we use the frit, we'll roll through it a couple times, maybe even 3 or 4 times. It just makes more of a dense color. If you don't have enough on there, they just look a bit washed out. And it takes heat. You have to melt that first layer of frit in before you can apply more. Only so much will stick at one time. Which gets a nice even application too, covering the entire surface. And she mentioned earlier too that she'll be making a base, probably I'm assuming with some sand type of color to it, that the camel will adhere to. And once that camel's adhered to the base, then we can add the body of the girl, the saddle, I'm assuming will come first, and then the neck and the head of the camel. She's layering a transparent yellow over top of that opal yellow. This is a really nice effect. You probably won't be able to see the true effect of this today while she's working it and everything's hot. But when you put that base coat of that opal yellow down first and then some transparent yellow over top of it, when you look at this object at room temperature, your eye's going to mix the two. So you'll actually see that transparency over that sort of rich base tone of opaque, and it just gives it a lot more depth. If you're familiar with painting at all, when you have a canvas and you gesso that canvas and then you put colors on the gesso, that white gesso just really helps those colors to kind of pop and come to life. So it's a similar effect. What gold did she use? Gold topaz. So all these jars that we have, these are labeled R19, R164, R107. Those are codes for the company that we purchased the color from. R stands for Reichenbach, the German factory that produces the color we're working with, and the 107 or the 19, whatever it is, those are their codes for what color they make. It's very convenient for modern day glass blowers. We just go online and you can order through several distributors. You just pay online and they will ship out the color to you, right to your door. I mentioned earlier, there's over 200 color options nowadays, which is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. But they have their own batch recipes, that's what it's called. So the raw ingredients for glass, we have the base ingredient in a container right here. This is the silica sand. So the silica sand mixed with some soda ash, mixed with some limestone, that's called batch. And batch is the powder form before it's turned into glass. When you take batch and melt it in a furnace at 2,000 degrees, over time, batch forms glass. It chemically changes into glass. And those colors, as I mentioned earlier, come from different metals. metal oxides or metal chlorides mixed and melted in. But they have their own special batch recipes that no doubt they have developed over a long time. Catherine just used some cork paddles to squish that bubble. So she's given the profile to the camel. Cork is a really nice material for a glass studio. It's what I call soft on the glass. You can kind of get in there and squeeze and sort of, rub and scrub with the cork on the glass, and they won't leave any marks behind if you don't overuse them. But she's flattened off the body of the camel, so that's giving it the profile. And she's even got the beginning of, I believe, the hump of the camel. But you saw her squeeze in another constriction. So I talked about how we have to make sure there's a constriction line to break everything free from the blowpipe, and she's already squeezed that constriction line in there. Very important move. So now she's using that larger tag. So this is a bigger bubble than she had for the amount of glass for the head. And she could use the knife for this, but this tag now allows her to keep her hands a little further away from it. A little more leverage with it. That's the constriction. The tool that she has right there are called jacks. So that constriction line is called the jack line. And the jacks they're a fundamental tool for glass blowing. You can see a pair over here. The blades aren't really sharp, but they have the profile of a butter knife. And there's small jacks, there's large ones, there's different profiles. Some are more rounded, some are sharper. They're such a useful tool for glass blowing. You won't see her use them much for this piece because she's sculpting. But if you're making any kind of bowl or vase or a pitcher or a goblet especially, you use the jacks so much. They're such a versatile tool. And we put beeswax on the metal as a lubrication. So when you're squeezing the blades over the bubble and you're turning, the wax is a lubricant that stops the blades from sticking or grabbing. You might see a little smoke come off from them when she uses them. There's tool makers all over the world as well. We have a lot of different tools here. The bench right now, she probably has, I would say there's probably 6 or 7 different tool makers represented on her tool bench alone, more than that. The paper too, that's a local tool, right? So the newspaper, it's the Corning Leader that we're working with. As she's squeezing this bubble with those cork paddles, you might notice Helen is capping the back of the blowpipe. So she's trapping air pressure inside the bubble by doing that. If she didn't do that and Catherine squeezed the bubble, it could actually collapse and touch together, and then you wouldn't have a bubble anymore. There's many fine details that go into the process like this that really make a big difference. Just heard her say the pink saddle. Every time she reheats, you can see that orange come back, and it dissipates the longer you're away from the heat. Reinforcing those grooves, the segments of the camel's back and the hump. There's a little bit of wax on that as well. So some of the tools you put wax on there just to help them work right. Just a little bit of beeswax. And this is pretty common when you're sculpting something, to have the lead glassmaker, which we call the gaffer, stay seated at the bench, and then you have your assistant take over the pipe and kind of take quick reheats for you. It allows the gaffer to stay at the bench and have whatever tool in hand that they need and be ready to get right to work with it. So Helen jumps in and just kind of handles turning the pipe back and forth. So these are the pink dots that are in the drawing. And for those of you that have joined us here in the amphitheater, after I gave the description of this, or anybody that's joined us online after the fact, this is our You Design It, We Make It program, and we're creating Julia's design. Julia is 5 years old, and she drew this camel with a little girl. It says, "My fairy tale is about a poor girl named Melissa and her magic camel, Peanut. He can make anything out of sand. The little dots on him, which she's putting on there now, are glitter, and the pink on his back is the saddle for Melissa to ride on him. Together the two help people who need things by making them out of sand. They are a very good team. P.S. Melissa has tan skin, but I didn't have that color. I really hope you pick my picture. I loved watching you make the donut monster." The donut monster is a previous You Design It. I think it was the last one that we did. Helen gaffed that one, and it turned out really, really cool. But Catherine is working from Julia's design to bring this to life. So we've got the camel head made. We have Julia's upper body made. The legs will go on sooner, or at some point here. And she's working on the body of the camel and drawing on these little polka dots. So she had a raspberry pink little rod of color that she put on there. Now she's using, looks like a celadon green. It's almost like a, kind of like a robin's egg blue, but it's called celadon. And now she's got some opal orange. Lots of color. This is a really quick application because of those rods. They're so narrow. They heat up instantly. Those little ends just liquefy in that hot torch, and then she can just kind of dab them on there. It's very important that you don't remain away from the heat too long when you're doing something like this. And that's why Helen takes these quick reheats. We call those flash heats or a flash. It's just to maintain a base temperature. Thanks, guys. Enjoy your day. How old is Julia? She's 5 years old. Yep. She's not here with us today, but she's online. So she is watching online. Yep. Amanda Kranz over here is moderating our online activity. And then a neat thing about this program too, so we live stream it, but after, it usually takes a week or two for our team to kind of get everything put together, the final edit per se, and some good still shots or video of the final piece. But this video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so it will be on there indefinitely after that. Yeah, there's a huge amount of content already on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and see visiting artists that we've had come and work with us. You can see our own team doing some live demonstrations, or what were live demonstrations at the time. There's a lot of tutorial stuff on there as well, a lot of educational videos. The studio across the parking lot, the studio of the Corning Museum of Glass, they have a wonderful program where they offer workshops and seminars, intensive classes and whatnot. And they'll bring instructors from all over the world to teach those classes, to beginners, to intermediates, to advanced students. Great way to learn or develop more skill. And a lot of their content is on that channel as well. So I think we're getting ready to transfer this body of the camel to a punty. That's what Helen's forming. A punty is just some glass shaped up on the end of, this case, a solid rod, used to adhere to whatever you're working. So we're going to flip this around. When you attach a punty, you want to make sure that it's going to break free in the end, or some way to get it off the punty. So we tend to do quite a bit of prep work to it. You can see how she rolls it on this metal table, which is called a marver, to kind of point that punty up. So you don't want to have too broad of a contact area with the glass. Hot glass sticks to hot glass. You want it to stick, but you don't want it to fuse permanently. A lot of that has to do with the temperatures too. When you join two surfaces together, the hotter those surfaces are with glass, the more permanent that connection is. So some people call this a cold connection, but I don't like that because it's a very deceiving term. It's not cold at all. It's just not too hot. Nice easy tap does that. Perfect job. Yeah, you know the drill. You've seen a show with us before. We like to give some enthusiasm when that part goes well. That's a difficult thing for glass blowers, for beginner glass blowers to learn. Now, she did something right there. I didn't talk about it when she did it, but she took her tweezers, she dunked them in the bucket of water, and she dripped a little water on it. You saw that. You could actually hear it. The water, when it hits the glass in its rigid state, it was probably around 1,000, maybe 11 or 1,200 degrees, those water drops create stress cracks. So that's thermal shock. We can use thermal shock to our advantage if you know how to use it, and she does. So she just shocked that constriction, tiny little cracks form, and that tap on the pipe is the vibration that does the rest. But that same thermal shock can set in just by air cooling. If we're ever away from an oven too long and the glass gets too cold, it will crack, it will fall apart. So we have to be really, really cautious with it. But flipping the piece around, she's got the hump at the back done. She's got that shape where she wants it. Flipping it around gives her the ability to focus heat on the bottom side or the belly of the camel. And so she'll kind of finish this off here. And I think Helen's starting up legs. Is that what you're doing? Cool. So Helen's going to roll through the same color combo. 2 rolls of that opal yellow, and I think 1 or 2 rolls of that gold topaz. And she'll probably be able to get all the legs out of this one mass that Helen has at the moment. Yeah, of course. I was just going to ask you, do you have the, yep, got the drill over there. Here, I'll take this for you. So Catherine has made the body of the camel blown, but she just sealed off the opening. Now it's fine at the moment because we're pretty thick and everything is stable, but if she doesn't do this next move, we can create some issues. She's actually going to use a tungsten pick that's attached to a drill and drill a little hole into the body of the camel. This just gives it a vent for the air to come and go as we work this. So if you don't have a hole in a blown form like this, if you seal it off, as you heat it, the air expands. As it cools, the air shrinks. And that can actually destroy the form. It can either pop the glass if it's thin enough when you're heating it, or it can actually sink in and collapse as it's cooling. So to make sure to avoid that, it's something you see quite a bit of in sculpture with glass when it's blown, is to use a tungsten pick. And you don't have to have it on a drill, this just makes it a little bit faster. But tungsten's a really good material that, unless it gets really hot, won't actually stick to the glass. But when you heat it enough with a torch, it drills right through that rigid glass and makes a vent hole. So that's a smart move on her part to do that. Making use of both workstations, so Helen's at our smaller reheating oven. These are running with natural gas and forced air. We could use propane as well, but we have natural gas piped into our amphitheater. If you've seen a show on our innovation stage, has anybody here seen a show on the innovations stage? That's a very different kind of hot shop. The ovens up there run on electricity, which is really, really rare. Now, a lot of melting furnaces lately are starting to become a lot more people are beginning to use the electric melting furnace. But for the reheating chambers, the electric reheating oven doesn't heat the glass as quickly as a gas-fired oven. It works just fine, but you have to adapt to it. If you're used to working out of a gas reheating oven and you go to that electric one, the rhythm is off a bit. It just takes you longer to soften the material. The reason we have an all-electric stage or a hot shop is that for about 10 years, our museum has partnered with Celebrity Cruise Lines, and on 3 of Celebrity ships, there are electric shops. So we had a team of glassmakers on board each of those ships all year round when we were partnered with them, and the electric ovens were wired into the ship's diesel generators. So that's how we were blowing glass out in the open seas all over the world. Actually, Catherine, Helen, and myself were all part of that program. Our museum ended that partnership several years ago on a high note. Everything was good. It was just time to end that partnership. Days like today, when I wake up and I look at the real field temperature of -6, I miss those days of going down to the Caribbean and blowing glass and going to a bunch of different beaches. Yep.
Not shoveling sand.
Yeah. Not scraping the layers of ice off my car. It was part of our outreach program. So really, in one statement, our museum's mission is to tell the world about glass. Now that's a simplified, that's a condensed version of that. But blowing glass out on cruise ships was doing that. We had a huge audience. People from all over the world would sail on those ships. And we did demonstrations like what you're watching now every single day and night on board those cruise ships somewhere in the world. And they went to, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, Australia, New Zealand, Alaska, South America, everywhere. Iceland, Norway. Talking about YouTube, if you get on YouTube and you just type in hot glass show at sea, you'll find a lot of different videos. A lot of the guests that were on board watching that program uploaded their videos. Those 3 ships still have a glass studio out there. Those studios are still on board those vessels, and it's run by a different company now. So it's a different business. But Catherine's working the legs, and you can see that she's done a couple details with the tweezers, using the butter knife there to sculpt in the crease where the joints kind of go. But she used the tweezers to kind of pull I don't know what it's called, but like the back of the knee of the camel. Did you go to Egypt, Catherine? Did you ride a camel? So Catherine traveled quite a bit with that hot glass program at sea, and one of the stops, I went there several times as well, was Alexandria in Egypt. And Catherine said that she saw the pyramids. She also rode a camel while she was there. So it was preliminary research for today's You Design It. That was one of the neatest things about that program. Not only being able to blow glass and enjoy our job and demonstrate and share our passion and love of the material, but being able to travel to those exotic locations and furthermore get to see a lot of those places too. We could go on many of the tours that the ships offered. They would let us, as crew members, go as escorts on some of those tours. So you get to go on those tours for free, but you would help out the main escort, and you would be their helper. Sometimes that just meant you had to carry around the number, the bus that you were on, so everybody could find their way back, which is just as important. Are you making a base and then sticking this to it?
So those are the knees, you push the knees in, and we'll put a bottom part of the leg.
Okay. Anybody here have any questions? I know people are kind of coming and going. We're in the midst of making a camel with a little girl on the saddle of the camel. We don't have the saddle on there yet. We have there's the drawing. Thank you. Brad is up in our AV booth and he's doing all the camera operation. So we've got most of the girl made and in an oven that's holding it right now at around 1,000 degrees. So it's kind of babysitting it until we're ready. But she's working, this is Catherine Ayers and Helen Tegler. They're working together to create the body of the camel right now. And this whole piece will have a base of glass that the camel will stand on. And once we have that in place, we'll add the girl. And then, of course, the neck and the head to the camel. You can see when Catherine goes up to that oven or when she comes back to the bench, carrying that rod around, she's really delicate with it. She's really careful not to bump it into anything. She's careful not to just set it down too hard. That punty that we're attached to, that connection's really small. We design it to break free when we're ready. But any vibration going through it at the wrong moment can cause that camel to pop off before you're ready. So you have to be really light-handed and just move very carefully with it. But Helen has been reheating and reshaping this bit. A lot of glass blowers will call it a feeder bit. So Helen gathered up enough glass and enough color to be able to get all of these legs out of that bit. But then each time Catherine cuts the little bits off of there, Helen reshapes it on our marbling table. She reheats it at another workstation and preps it yet again. What do you need, Catherine? A bit for the hooves? Sure. Yep. What color do you want those out of? The what? The topaz? Just a couple layers of it? Okay. The dark brown powder on the left? Okay. So she said once she gets the next segment of legs on there, she wants me to start up a little gather for the hooves. When we use the color that you can see Helen applied earlier, all you need to do is take a molten gather of clear glass and roll through these little shards. These are called frit. These heat up instantly and then you can melt them right in. We also have a powder that's out here. So I can just hear Catherine said, I'll take a quick flash and then I'll be ready. Again, that flash is just a maintenance heat. The left or right door? This one? Give her a little more room in that oven.
Yeah, you can start that first.
Catherine made a bunch of color samples earlier. Sometimes when you look at the frit or the powder, it looks different after it's been heated. So it's nice to make a color sample and see what you're working with. So all these little, if you folks can see them, there's some discs of colored glass up here on our marburing table. And that's what she used. Okay.
I'll do the 2 front ones and then the 2 back ones.
Okay.
And that's what you want for the base.
Okay, so I've got the little bit of brown for the hooves. She said she'll do the 2 front ones first, and then the 2 back ones. Working very efficiently. Is this enough, or do you want me to get a fresh one? I think Helen is starting up the base. So she has a different opaque yellow, sort of a tan yellow, and she's rolling through. So a lot of teamwork goes into glass making, especially for a project like this. And I used the term gaffer earlier on. So gaffer is the lead glass maker. They're the one that's in charge, and Catherine is gaffing Julia's design. But really, when you're working on a project and multiple pieces are coming together like this, the gaffer orchestrates everything. So if you think of an orchestra, you have one conductor and all those instruments. That conductor keeps the rhythm, they keep everybody in check, and that's really Catherine's job for this. So I'm not sure if you can hear her out in the seats, but she's telling Helen to start this, she's telling her how much glass she needs for the base, she's telling me what she needs, the timing, all that. Very, very important. You usually see teams of 2 or 3 in blowing glass, but you can have 10 or 15 people working together. Depends on the project, depends on what you're doing. In a production setting, this isn't a production setting, but if we were, say, doing production glass making, we're making bowls or goblet spaces, whatever it is, you could use 2 benches, you could use 3 benches, you could have a startup team beginning the piece, and they could hand that piece off when they got halfway done to the finishing team, and then would go back and start another one. So you get into this rhythm where you're sort of, 2 or 3 pieces are in process the entire time, more like an assembly line. All right. I like that detail where she put the hooves on there and then split them to really give it that. Okay. These little details make such a difference. She just said a little flash heat on the whole thing and then a little extra heat on the bottom, on the feet and the hooves, the bottom of the legs. Also, when you cut into glass, it does leave a jagged edge, a cut mark, and we like to polish that using the heat, soften the edge a bit. Do the same thing with the back hooves. Is the base that Helen's making that going to be the final punty too, or is that going to get flipped around at all? That'll be the final punty. Okay, so what Helen has is a few gathers of clear glass. She's rolled through some of that color, and she'll turn that into the base for this whole thing. I'm going to be willing to bet that she's going to probably flatten this out into a disc or something. But I just asked Catherine if the punty that Helen has will be the final punty or if we'll transfer that mass over onto something else. And that's what they're discussing right now. So I think Helen will just form that gob into the base and keep it on that handle. Looking great, Catherine. So often when we're sculpting something like this, you'll see that we flip back and forth quite a bit. So we're still working with gravity all the time. Sometimes we don't just turn or rotate all the time. If we're making a vessel, a blown form, and working in the round, we tend to turn constantly. But for sculpture like this, it's more common to flip back and forth. Using that torch to heat up specific areas. She said she wants to bend those front legs a little bit more. But I take a brief heat, a flash heat on everything, making sure that nothing else gets too cold. Especially the punty. So that little bit of clear glass that's holding the body of the camel to this rod, that needs to stay hot enough to stay strong enough to hold this piece. Sometimes you'll see us torch the punty. If we want to let the piece cool and stiffen up, we can torch the punty and make sure that that's still stable. But temperature management, that's a big thing that we talk about. So that's what she's doing here. She's got the legs where she wants them. She'll let them lose heat and stiffen, but we got to keep everything else warm enough. Okay. Are you just going to torch when we go to join this, you're just going to torch the hooves and attach it that way? Okay. And you said you want a little extra heat on the legs right now then? All right. Okay. Talking about the ship program, we did do design-ins out there as well, usually once per cruise. So the cruises were obviously a lot of different itineraries, but sometimes they were a 7-day cruise, sometimes they were a 14 or 12-day. And there was a youth department on board. So they had a lot of different activities for the the younger crowd that were also sailing with all the guests. And we worked with the youth staff to do a You Design It program once a cruise. So they would bring sometimes it was 2 a cruise. It depended on how many people were cruising with us, people were sailing. But it was a lot of fun to see what kids out on board came up with for designs, and they would come to our shows and watch it being made. You need anything, Helen? Paddle or something? You want this torch going at all? No? Okay. Sure. So Helen's working up the base. I'm going to give her a hand if she needs it. Are you using the paddle, or can I use this big one? All right. And Helen made the profile in an oval shape. So this will match the footprint of the camel. And we're just trying to make sure that it's level on the bottom side. So if you're looking in the cameras right now, Helen has this on the punty, the final punty, but she's also squeezed in one of those constrictions, which is so important because when we put the camel onto this piece and we build the neck and the head of the camel and put the little girl on the saddle, we need to make sure that everything can break free with no trouble. So they're going to do a little price check here, see if the size is appropriate. Looks like it's going to be pretty good. Looks like the feet will match up nicely. And we're going to join these using heat. Sometimes we put a little bit of molten glass on something as a glue bit. That's what we call it. But in this case, I think Catherine will just use the torch and spot heat the hooves, get them nice and soft, and adhere them to the base. And then this camel will break free from this punty and will be on the base that Helen has. Moves like this is where you have to know the heat really well. You have to have just the right temperatures. Glass will always want to break at the weakest point. And when you have these little legs, which are, they're beautifully sculpted, but they're delicate, if you don't have enough heat placed in the legs themselves, you can break one of them right off. You want one more quick flash? All right, one last reheat on this. Looks like Helen's ready.
So we'll do the wider side down, we'll do the back legs down.
I'll hold the straight shears on that punny too when you're ready. I got them right over here. Yep. Which side do you want up?
So back legs down, the wider side down.
Nice. You want to flip? All right. Good seal on there with the hooves. You got it. Yep. Perfect. That deserves a round of applause. Let's give it up for the team. Nicely coordinated by Catherine and Helen. So those punning connections, to really make sure they break free when we need them to, it not only comes down to having the temperatures right going into that joint and transfer, but often you'll see us kind of crimp the punny with a cold tool, the metal shears. When you do that, the metal kind of shocks that punny, so it helps it to weaken and break free. But also, just as important is that when you hold the shears there and you tap on that rod, the vibration that goes through to that joint the vibration goes more into the tool that you're holding and not the piece itself. So it's kind of a good little trick to employ, especially when you have really delicate parts like that. You know, sometimes you might just crimp the punny and let go, and if you tap on the rod, it could be successful, but that vibration goes through those skinny legs and it could crack one of them. So holding the tool there to kind of absorb that vibration that's going up. Just lots of little tricks of the trade. All right, you doing the saddle? Helen's rolling through some of that raspberry pink. So this will be the saddle. We have the description, and again, a lot of people have joined us after the fact, so welcome to our You Design It program that Catherine Ayers is making. Julia's design. So this is a design that Julia drew and submitted online. We're making a camel with a girl that will be on the camel's back. The camel's name is Peanut, and the girl is named Melissa. So the camel has glitter on there, so all these little colored dots that Catherine has already put on. We'll put the saddle on the camel's back, and then we'll start putting the girl on the camel's back along with the neck and the head. Now Catherine has pre-made most of the girl. She has the head and the torso of the girl, and she also has the head of the camel. She'll probably sculpt the neck after she gets the saddle placed on here. And Helen is working up that saddle, and while she's doing that, Catherine's just going to kind of balance the temperatures out. So I could just hear them talking. Helen said, "Do you want a hot blob?" And that refers to the shape and the setup and the temperature. That is a very technical term, hot blob. But you'll hear the glass makers say, "I want you to point this up. I want you to roll it into a taper. I want you to make a reverse taper. I want you to cut it to a point." We're referring to the setup that we want that glass bit brought. So a hot blob is this, just a really hot mass of material. So I'll flip. And Catherine said, really hot. Flip. And I'll turn. You got it. You got the pipe. You don't have much time to sculpt glass when it's this hot and this small scale. The smaller it is, the faster it stiffens up. So she said, next is Melissa, and then we'll put the neck on there. I think this is a smart approach. If Catherine were to put the neck of the camel on, she would have another element that she had to kind of work around when she went to put Melissa's body on the saddle. Yes. Can you what? Yep. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to torch your punny just a little bit. Side to side. And flip. Some details on the saddle here. That is, I think it's a black piece of cane that she's using. Are these the legs?
Yep.
So this the legs for Melissa. When she sculpted half of Melissa earlier, before we started, she made a torso. So we did the shirt and the head. Putting the saddle on there and then drawing the details for the legs is a nice way to make them smaller scale with stability. Because if you made legs that small and they were protruding off to the side, they'd be very, very fragile. So now that everything's starting to come together, you see quite a bit. One, Helen's kind of managing the garage, going back and forth. Catherine has stepped outside the bench, so she has a better working area and kind of look at this from the other side while I'm just kind of holding on to the punty and taking these flash heats, these quick reheats. Being careful not to overheat, but making sure not to underheat as well. And from time to time, just a little bit of torch on that punty, make sure that that's warm enough. So which way do you want the back legs down or the back legs up?
Back legs down.
Back legs are down right now.
Want to take it for a quick flash?
Sure. So I'll give this a quick flash. This is where you want to make sure you have the right position. So she said back legs down. And that's because of the way that she's holding on to Melissa. So back legs are up right now, and I will flip right there. Nice. Using that torch just to get those specific areas nice and soft. Very cool.
You okay, Chris?
Yeah, I'm good. Let's torch that punny one more time. I love it. This is great. Yeah, this is fantastic.
Marble camel.
I love it.
Your
That's
sister
good.
keeps commenting the camel emoji too. It's really cute.
Catherine's sister Dana's watching online.
Carol was watching you, but she's quiet now. Alright, ready? Ready.
All right, so here comes the tail. I like to let this slump a bit before we do this move, so when you stay in one position, you try to keep everything centered as best as you can. You've got the punny. Give ourselves a little more room in the oven here. Nope. I like those little details on the tail. So she cut the tail, but then after cutting it to length, she used those shears to go in and make some little snips at the very tip of it. Gives it that real life look. And now Helen's working what will become the neck. And Catherine just said, shape it like a handle. So that's a really good thing to say to a glass blower. When you say, I want that like a handle, we know exactly what setup to create. Usually a tapered cylinder. So Catherine said she didn't really like the way that tail was, so she just cut away some excess. And flip. No, we're good. It's moving a little bit. The back of the bunny is great. Just what you're doing. The final step for this piece, once it's all done, is called annealing. It's a slow cooling process. We'll probably put this on a 16-hour annealing cycle. The thicker something is, the longer it needs to slowly cool. This you could probably do in 12 hours. The body of the camel is blown, but why not 16 just to be safe? Most of the blown work that we do, vessels that are, not very thick, 8 hours, 10 hours is pretty good. But we'll at least do a 12-hour for this. All right, so Helen's got the tail bit ready.
Go right for that head. You want the second one,
A little flash for this. This will be really neat. So the camel neck, which is long but kind of an S-curve to it, we'll see how Catherine creates that. Portioning off what she needs. You can really see the temperature difference. So that's the same color as the body of the camel, as the legs, as the tail. But you see all that orange from the light that it's emitting. So when Helen brought that over, nice and hot, see all that glow. That's a higher pressure compressed air system, that air gun that Catherine's using right now. Once she gets that neck shaped up, she drops the temperature a bit just to stabilize things. Let me give you a quick flash for that, honey. And this is where I want to be really attentive as I'm heating, not to let that neck get way out of control or touch back. Catherine will do a little heat to that punny. Would you mind just fluffy torching the base itself too? Just give that a little extra heat here. And the legs. So we want to balance the temperatures out, let the neck stiffen up, but make sure to keep everything else warm enough. You can have one area of the glass moving, but if the other areas, like the bottom of the piece or the legs, are too cold, they can actually crack while the other areas are soft. And that's one great way to use these torches, just to balance the temperatures. Here's the camel head. And I'll flip when I can. And I'll take a quick flash here in just a second. Oh, nice, she turned. That's really cool. They're just giving it a slight bend. Gives it a lot of life by doing that. Very cool. This is where these quick reheats become a little bit more challenging. But she's making sure to really seal that. That's moving pretty good. Making sure that it's really sealed to that neck. A good strong connection with that torch. Let me flip. It'll be a few flashes at least, Helen. Make sure to balance everything out here. Helen's already gearing up with Kevlar gloves, a face shield, everything she needs to grab this and safely get it into the annealing oven. Let's just torch the bottom a couple times here, once you get the head set where you want it, Catherine. Okay, sounds good. You might notice a little kind of metallic sheen that builds up on the glass, the colored glass from using that propane torch. What that is reduction. The metals that are used to make the colors will reduce from that propane torch. And sometimes we intentionally do that to give it a metallic look. She's not doing that intentionally right now, but each time we reheat in our oven, that reduction will burn away. You're going to hot torch the neck and head connection.
We'll do a smaller flame.
I'm going to take a seat here really quick. That way? Flip. And flip. And let's flash. All right, so a little bit of cleanup work where she joined the head to the neck. You had to heat the neck enough to get everything to stick, but it kind of almost mushrooms that neck connection. No, we're good. So she just heated it up and used the butter knife to do a little bit of smoothing out. Much nicer transition. Good job, Catherine. Looks great. Flip. So at this point, once she gets the head in position, we'll really take a moment to balance the heat out. If you put this away too soon and that head connection's still a little soft, the head will just kind of sink down and will slump down in the annealer. So we generally take just a series of very quick heats at this point, maybe do a little bit of torching, but balancing the temperatures. You're gonna move the neck? Is that what you said? Okay. Let me give you a flash. These are those little details that experienced glassmakers are really good at doing at the end of a project like this. Instead of getting a little nervous and saying, I need to put this away, taking the time to heat up those little areas, give that neck a little bend, give it that kind of natural character, and it makes all the difference in the end. Let's do that one more time. Let that neck stiffen up. Just torch the bottom one more, and I'll take one more flash heat. That neck's moving just a touch. All right. Give it just 1 second. Okay. So a little bit of water on that punty. We like to drop the rod down for this move so the water falls away from the piece. You don't want a water drop to hit it. And a couple taps breaks it free. Nice job. And I'll run over and grab the annealer door for Helen. So quick fire polish, that sharp mark on the bottom. We call that the punty mark. And it's sharp before you fire polish it, so she torches that. Looks like she's just kind of pushing that in a little bit. And away this one will go into the annealer until tomorrow morning. Let's give a big, big round of applause for Catherine Ayers and Helen Tegler. Keep it going for our designer, Julia, who is watching online with us. Beautiful job. Again, so that's our annealing oven, and that will sit in there all day until we start that annealing program. That piece will take at least 12 hours to properly cool down to room temperature. If you've joined us after we started that piece and you want to see that through completion from beginning to end, that video, this was live streamed, and that video is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, go to the Corning Museum of Glass page, it'll take probably at least a week, maybe 2 weeks for that to get uploaded. But you can search that later on, and you can actually watch that full video so you can see the whole thing being made. But that's going to wrap up our You Design It morning down here. The next show in here starts at 12:30, so we're going to kind of clean up, get things reorganized. We're open till 5, so enjoy your visit. Thank you so much for coming to see us. You guys have been great.